Hello, everybody. I think we're going to get started. Welcome to Designing Your Research Agenda 4.2, the Fulbright edition. My name is Dan Wong. I'm co-founder and executive director of Design Incubation. We are celebrating our 11th year, I guess. Are we going to do this every year now? Of Design Incubation. One announcement I'd love to share with everybody is that we are now officially a 501c3 and a charitable organization. So very happy to be doing that. There's a lot of stuff going on in the back end, registering for all kinds of discounts that are being offered by various companies and such, and trying to basically create a smoother workflow. So just some announcements. We are planning on upcoming virtual colloquium. So if you have research that you would love to present to our group of people, our constituents, academics, design researchers, please be ready, and we will be announcing that coming up shortly. And for those of us who attended our academic abstract writing workshop at the CAA conference, we are going to be running a full-fledged workshop in the coming months. So watch out for that call for applications. There'll be two tracks in that area. One where you have developed your research and developed some abstracts and you'd like to adjust them and edit them for different venues, for papers and conferences and such. And then the other track will be for people who are new to academia and still working out their research and still trying to understand what an academic abstract is all about. So welcome everybody, and I will pass this along to our other design incubation panelists. Liz, first of all, Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Liz DeLuna, one of the chairs of design incubation and director of programming. And I probably have been a member for the past 11 years. So it's exciting that we've come this far and that we can have people now join as members. And I think handing it over to Heather and Jessica, who are actually going to mentor this panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Snyder Quinn. I'm chair and director of Design Futures. I think I've been with DI now for how long? 4 or 5 years, something. It's all blurring together. I'm super happy to be here. Jess will talk in a little more detail about this specific panel, but for those of you that don't know DI, we're really trying to work with the community to elevate creative practice and research and design and support the community in a really kind way, uplift the folks around us, bring to light lesser known voices and things like that. Jess and I started this series as I was, building my own research agenda, and we were trying to think about the breadth and depth of this field and how complicated that can be. And so I think did we just say, Jess, this is our 5th year of this particular
series? The first one was 2020.
Yeah, so if you look at our YouTube channel and you're, as you're building your own research, whatever phase you're in, we try to have all levels of faculty, all levels of institutions, types of institutions. We even had international folks. So really trying to learn from, get a, national and global perspective for that. And so you can look at those people's presentations on our YouTube as well. So off to Jess.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Barness, and I'm also a co-chair of Design Incubation and the director of research initiatives. And as Heather mentioned, we've been doing this now for about 5 years. And each time we invite 3 panelists, actually our first one was 4, I think, but 3 panelists to share how they crafted what they do as part of their creative activity and research in the context of where they are faculty. Every institution runs a little bit differently, expectations are different, and of course, given the nature of communication design, what we do differs too across, across all of us. We have with us 3 panelists today. We have Sarah Edmands Martin, who is from the University of Notre Dame, Natalia Ilyin from Cornish College of the Arts and VCFA, and Natasha Poggio, who is from University of Houston downtown. Our theme this time around is Fulbright scholars, because all of our panelists recently completed a Fulbright experience, various places around the world. and they'll be talking about how that affected their research agendas, the kind of creative work that came out of that experience. When we invite our panelists, we pose a few questions that they can think about, that they might want to respond to. Some of these include, how did they determine their research agenda in the context of where they are faculty? What led them to pursue a Fulbright? What are some highlights from their Fulbright? And also, how has that affected their overall creative research trajectory? We're going to start off today with Sarah.
I'm going to hold up for 1 sec. Sorry, Sarah. I just wanted the folks who are texting me to let you know that at the end of this, we tend to let people come in and join for the social hour. So right now we're in webinar style, but you will be invited in after. Okay, that's all. Back to Sarah.
Awesome. Well, I thought I would kind of take everyone very quickly through. Actually, I'm going to start my timer so I stay on track. Quickly through what I do and then get into the fun stuff, which is in the Fulbright. So very broadly, to give context for kind of how I position myself as a designer, it's across these three kind of nodes in the broad constellation of design, communication. So visual communication design, your kind of classic combining text, image, and experience. Speculative design, which I can get into in a second, but it's really, thinking about imagining what our preferred futures might be. And then media aesthetics, so critical theory surrounding this conversation. So I do a lot of different kinds of things across bookmaking, illustration, installation design, kind of materials practice with resin casting, but also digital processes like programming and animation, stop motion, 3D modeling, and some stuff with augmented reality, digital storytelling, and AR, VR. So as a designer and an artist, my primary production is in designing objects and media. And so in this way, can you all see like people on the right or no? You can?
I started
no, you can't.
and then it moved.
Okay, great. Never mind. Back to the content. So I'm not unlike practitioners in art departments or design departments, but at the same time, my work has always supported this bidirectional movement between practice and theory. So my design leads to ideas that I work out in essays and book projects, and my writing inspires my design. And so when I was thinking about a Fulbright, I was looking at programs. I was looking at some programs that were more art-based, and then I was also looking at programs that were more media aesthetics and theory-based. And what I tried to practice on my Fulbright was a combination of these things. So practice-based research, critical making, and artist research creation, which essentially all kind of mean the same things. But what it means is I make things in order to think through ideas differently than one might as just a media historian or a critical theorist. No shade to those folks, they're great, but kind of solving or thinking through problems in a research creation way. And then I also think about this through speculative design, as I mentioned before. So folks like Stuart Candy, one of the earliest theorists of speculative design, breaks this down into this concept of like potential futures and this kind of diagram that he created of like the futures cone. So we have possible futures, probable futures, plausible futures that exist at different levels of likelihood. And preferred is sort of this zone of speculation where I think material practice-based folks can enter into and give life and form and shape to what that preferred future might look like. So into the fun stuff around the Fulbright, I chose Norway for a university, actually at the University of Bergen, but all of the Norwegian Fulbrighters got together in Oslo during this big kind of research seminar, maybe about, I would say, a month or two into the spring Fulbright, and presented their initial research. And this was really great because you got to see and talk to folks from all over the disciplines and what research they were conducting. So I was in Bergen, which is the second largest city of Norway, very rainy, and has this history of trade and boat navigation. Whaling is also kind of a big kind of industry historically there. And it's also incredibly hilly. And so most of my time was spent like walking up and down the city as if I was on a Stairmaster all the time. There were these historic areas, which I spent a lot of time in, because what I was interested in with my own work was thinking about storytelling, fairy tales, fables, myths, and how those materialize in different cultures. So I was kind of looking at Old Norse fairy tales and Old Norse riddles and fables, and I'll get to that in a second, but just to give you some like eye candy of what Norway is like in the winter, it looks like this. This is the chateau that I lived in at the top of like a mini mountain. But then spring came and it looked like this, which was very exciting. I worked with the University of Bergen in their Center for Digital Narrative. And I started to blend this practice of intervening within an archive, so their archive of mythology, Norwegian riddles and fable tales, fairy tales and fables, and then thinking about creative ways to bring those stories to life. It's called the Ethno-Folkloristic Archive. It had not been open for about 10 years. Prior to my visit. They had opened it the year before and had connected it to other archives, the fables and fairy tales across all of Norway. So this kind of like national project to open up the archives. They'd never had an artist or a designer kind of in that space. So this is also kind of the humanities building where I worked, and I spent a lot of time, but I also traveled a lot when I was in Norway. I used Norway as kind of this base to kind of go explore other archives around Europe. So I went to Oslo a fair amount as it's connected by train. There's a transatlantic train that you can take, and visited the Futures Library, which as a speculative designer was really informative. This is a speculative artwork that collects stories that have been published. Margaret Atwood was the first author to contribute a text. And as the book is put in this library, they plant a tree in this particular area of just outside of Oslo in the forest. And the books will not be read for 100 years. And so it's imagining what that future will look like. And yet the duration of time for us to access that is limited. This really inspired me and actually informed the work that I would create on my Fulbright. On the left, you see some of the writing from the archive that I was working through. And then on the right, you see kind of like photos of my adventures exploring these like very wet, kind of fairy tale like landscapes. There's a large culture and kind of mythology around trolls in Norway. And so I was kind of absorbing all of that and then thinking about fairy tales and fables. The University of Bergen also had this electronic literature knowledge base, which was a place for them to collect design and media interventions within like new media, digital literature, e-lit, that kind of space. Of all of these pieces, about 0.113% had to do with fairy tale or fable. And so I found this like gap that, you know, people weren't really intervening along the theme or in the genre of fairy tale and fable. Here's some of the kind of archival pieces that I was working through. They were obviously in Norwegian, and so I was working with Norwegian scholars to help me translate some of these. And what I found was there was actually a formula to the way Norwegian riddles from this time were set up. And I was really inspired by that formula and actually began creating my own riddles, which I'll show you here in a second. The more kind of like archival material that I was looking at that came to inform the piece that I eventually created. I was also just broadly researching Old English, the connection between Old English riddles, and again, the kind of format of that like algorithm of how those work in comparison to the Norwegian fables. And then the University of Bergen has this amazing award-winning natural history museum that was right next to where I was staying. And so I'd visit it every day, like all the time. See if this video will play. They had won all of these amazing awards. They had like old like whale skeletons in conjunction with these interventions the artists would do within this kind of cabinets of curiosity-like space. So just showing you some more images here of my process. Oops, skip forward. So the piece that I ended up making is called A Fable of Tomorrows. I'm just checking time. Okay. It's I ended up creating this immersive installation that was kind of pooling all of this visual material that I was finding in and around Bergen. I created this interactive object that when you get close to it with your phone, you can see it here, it brings up a game on your phone. And so you're in this kind of Plato's cave-like space that's kind of pointing to climate change and fairy tales and looking back and looking forward. And then you get close to this object and a game pops up on your phone. It's using NFC chips, which are the same things that when you like swipe to pay, or not swipe to pay, but like tap to pay at a grocery store, that's the technology that they're using. So that little gem was like encrusted on the inside with these NFC chips because I was really insecure about it activating at various angles. So in this dark space, you start playing this game and you're solving riddles in order to get line by line a fable that's being told to you from the future. And I was coding at this time, and each line of the fable gets revealed after a certain duration of time, and that duration of time gets exponentially larger. So you can see here, you get the first riddle to solve after 2 seconds, then 2 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 30 minutes. And so you cannot solve this game in a human lifetime. It's just outside of a human lifetime. There are all these other things, I'm kind of running low on time, but all of these other pieces. So wrong answers I would collect, and then the database of all of those users' wrong answers would fade in ghost-like on the screen. So you could a live archive of text and answers and problem solving and creativity was kind of being actively collected and then ghosted in over top the interface. There's a whole section on the death of the author, which I won't get into here, as well as a whole section on my citations, which you could kind of sort through. They would randomly appear if you clicked the footnotes section. And then because this game lasted more than a human lifetime, you got the option to end the game and stop playing. But it really kind of like negged you about that decision. So it's like, well, are you sure you really want to? You're going to give up. And if you click an end, you get an end to the fable, the amount of the fable that you had solved so far, and then the whole game would reset. So all of your time would be lost and you'd head back to the beginning. There's a long history of time and durational speculation within digital art, design, and speculative design. John F. Simon Jr.'s Palm Pilot, Every Icon, for example, is kind of classic example of this. But my piece is working in a slightly different way because it's not looking so far into the future. It's just almost past a human experience. And so it's actually kind of challenging some of what I was reading about with the speculative realists at this time. And I think there I will stop. I'll show you one more kind of video of the installation so you can get a sense of the 180-degree panorama video space. And the whole piece looped for about 30 minutes. So you would spend a lot of time in the space solving riddles. Some clues to the riddles were also embedded in the video piece. And then this showed at We Invented the Weekend in Manchester, UK, about a month after I finished the Fulbright. And so it was kind of immediately heading out to galleries. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions about the work or my decision-making in chat.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm silent clapping or something weird. Amazing to see that all after having seen it, virtually for so long. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Our next panelist with her Fulbright experience is Natalia Ilyin.
Well, hi. From the sublime to the ridiculous, as they say in Russian. I just plan to yak. I hope yakking, fits the bill. So I'd like to talk about 4 things in my 10 minutes. Ooh, let me do my timer so I don't go over, because I hate going over. I'd like to talk a bit more about the process of actually getting a Fulbright and how odd it was, because it wasn't normal, the normal way that people get them. And since my entire career has not been normal, I should have been used to that, but somehow I wasn't. So applying was a process, and I'm hoping that people will, who are looking at this and thinking, oh, maybe I'll get a Fulbright, realize that the process of Fulbrightness is not always completely direct. It's not like applying for a grant, for instance, where you take a weekend, you sequester yourself, you wham it into the form, and then you send it off. That's not really the way it worked for me. And so perhaps that's not the way it'll work for you. So this is the thing. I wrote a book. Okay, I have to go back farther than that. I was presenting at a conference in Korea, weirdly enough, for me, about graphic design, this enormous conference. Perhaps somebody went to it like 10 years ago. It was a long time ago. And I met a woman there who was interested in what I did. And I didn't realize that this woman was actually an editor at Bloomsbury. So a few years later, she wrote to me and she said, would you like to write this book about writing for designers? And I don't teach writing for designers. I teach history. I'm a historian, right? And I teach history and criticism. So, but I said, sure, I'll write that book because I'm a ham and I'll do anything. So when I wrote the book, of course, it came out right before the pandemic. So then everything stopped. But I got a call from a woman in Prague, a doctor of architecture in Prague, and she said, I read your book. Would you like to do this symposium we're having online about semiotics in architecture or something like that? I said, sure. Not knowing anything about semiotics in architecture, I said, that's a good idea. Let's do that. So I did that, and that seemed to go over well. So I suddenly got out of the blue, today I would think it would be phishing. I got a note from a doctor, Dr. Nina Baratsova, in another city in Czech Republic, who said, would you like to do something with us? Because we'd love to teach our design architects, our architects how to write, because they can't write, they're way out of a paper bag. So I said, sure, having no idea about that. So this woman is named Nina. You should know her. Her name is Nina Baratsova. She's the vice dean of the Faculty of Architecture in Brno University of Technology. And so she hunted around and she realized that there's a Fulbright that none of us knew about called the Fulbright Specialist. And that's why I'm here to talk to you about this, because the Fulbright Specialist is for people who cannot take 6 months or a year and go on a Fulbright. It's for people who are kind of a directed attack. I went, for instance, my Fulbright was 2 weeks long. Now I stayed in Czech Republic for a month, but the actual 2 weeks was the Fulbright. So it's a directed hit. You do kind of workshops or things that a person needs that on their end that they can't supply for themselves. So I really suggest, it's got its own website. It's a Fulbright program, but it has its own website and a different process of applying. So I just want you to know that. So now my stuff. So Dr. Bartsova was concerned, and you have to know something about the Czech to understand this. So I'm going to fling this in. I knew nothing about the Czech. I'm of Russian background, which doesn't endear you to Czech people. I'll just be honest about that, since they were under Soviet rule for a long time. Anyway, Dr. Bartsova was concerned about something, and this is what her concern was, that in Brno, which is the second largest city in Czech Republic, and one of the places that really got hit by the Nazis, I'm just going to say, because it's right by Vienna. It's about 40 minutes from Vienna. So the Czech Republic had an area that had been Jewish, and of course the Nazis sent all those people to Auschwitz. And then they collected the Romani tribes, people who were of different Romani backgrounds, and smushed them all into where the Jewish population had been. So And then they sent them to Auschwitz. So it's a horror of a background. However, after the war, a bunch of people came back that were Romani, not a few, just a few stragglers came back to the place they had been interned, which is called Chell. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is that Dr. Bartsova was worried that that area, which had been untouched because it was, of course, considered it's considered a scary, crime-laden area. It's not, but it was considered that. That she's worried that since their economy is so high, people are starting to tear down buildings and build these kind of functionalist buildings there. And she was worried about the lack of inclusion. Nobody's asking the Romani about it. They're just doing it. And she thought that her students should be able to write criticism of this. And because they all were up in arms about it, but none of them can write. So that's when I came in. Okay. So I came in to teach them to write, and we did it. We taught them to write critical analysis, the British and American kind, as opposed to the European kind, which is, as you know, having read your European critics, they tend to be discursive, not argumentative like we are. We're like, this is wrong. This should change. You don't do that. If you're Czech, you talk about how wonderful Dr. So-and-so's functionalist garage is, right? You don't, and then you kind of bring in a couple of philosophers and you kind of end it, right? You don't make an argument. And the reason for that is that your teachers were under Soviet rule and they couldn't do that. And so that's how you learn to write, right? So I got the glory of teaching these people how to write argumentative prose. Anyway, so the students, so that was my part. Dr. Bartsova suggested that we get together and get a specialist Fulbright. We did that. It goes back and forth. You have to go back and forth. Don't think it's going to be a weekend. It's not. It's a long process. And she wrote it. She's writing in English. I rewrote it a little bit to add a kind of a different flavor. And then the students, when they participated, they too changed the workshop because of whom they were, right? You teach to whom you are, to the people you have. So that's the long and short of it. And I think I'm really very close to, oh yeah, I'm pretty close to, what should I say for 2 more minutes? Oh, I went to a fabulous, the next time you're in Vienna, go to Brno, which a Czech student told me was named during the terrible vowel famine that they had. That's a Czech joke, the vowel famine. Okay. Anyway, it has no vowels in it, Brno. Anyway, go to Brno and go to the Turgendat villa, which it was done, created by Mies van der Rohe. So if that is something you should do. Anyway, I think that's my 2 minutes. I'm done.
Natalia, did we get your pictures to work? No.
We didn't get my pictures.
No.
We did not.
Oh.
Tragically, my pictures of my beautiful students and various Brno shots and pictures of Chell, which is the area that the Romani are in, are available online from me. I will send them to you. If anybody wants them, I'll send them.
Thank you.
But thank you very much. So specialist program is different from the regular Fulbright.
That's great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear that because I've been waiting for my kids to go to college to do a Fulbright, and now I'm like gonna do it sooner.
I didn't realize there was another option too. So this is
Amazing.
fantastic.
Yeah.
There is.
Also, Natalia, you didn't even need slides. Like I just
No.
enjoyed listening to about Czech Republic. So thank you so much.
I'm so sorry, the slides didn't work. They're really kind of added. I mean, you saw it already in your mind.
I could
We
visualize
did.
all of it.
We saw it in our mind. Exactly.
And next we have Natasha, who I know may have there's some background noise, possible issues. So we might try this.
And I'm thinking if it's too loud for her, we could do some QA for Sarah and Natalia
Yeah.
and then on and Natasha after.
Yep.
Okay, she
Okay.
said do that while we move.
Okay, so we're going to do some Q&A with Sarah and Natalia while Natasha resituates into a quieter space. You can use the chat if you'd like to pose any questions.
There was one in there, except
Okay.
I think it was just asking Natalia to connect. Hello, Natalia. I'm a Fulbrighter from the Philippines, currently now in the US pursuing my master's. I'm interested in researching about Philippine weaving patterns and semiotics. I wonder how we can connect. I am interested in your work.
Oh, well, first of all, you should connect with me, but you should also connect with my student, Fernando, who's Filipino, who's doing some interesting work and might be interesting for you to know, since he's doing it right now and he's interested in textile patterns and tattoo. So that might be interesting. But yeah, of course. So go to my fabulous website, which is so janky that it broke when recently I wrote an article, and I think I like 4 people looked at it, and the thing broke. It broke
It
from
broke?
Your
The
website
AI,
broke?
I was
the AI
overwhelmed.
Oh,
Overwhelmed.
No, I hope I just typed your website right. I did. Website in
right.
the chat.
Got
So
it.
do that, and then there's a little contact thing, and then you can just contact me through there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have 2 questions. Like, Natalia, you did a short one. Would you ever do a longer one? And then I'd love to hear, Sarah, your process and how long it led up, like the lead time to get it, making the connections, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Well, I was so interested in her work that I forgot to ask how long her Fulbright was.
Yeah.
The work sounded so interesting. I forgot. Did you ask me, or were you just yakking?
Oh, now I wondered if you wanted to do a longer one, Natalia, or 2 weeks
Oh,
is
of
like.
course. Are you kidding? But I teach in 2 places, so I can't, I teach at Cornish College of the Arts as a professor full time, and I also teach at Vermont College of Fine Arts, which weirdly is at CalArts. It's a CalArts subsidiary kind of. So I don't really have a lot of time to go for 6 months or so. Plus all my plants would die.
There is that.
I have to think
Yeah,
about this.
I did have to coordinate folks to kind of live in my house and watch everything for me, because I did the 6-month Fulbright, and you can propose your own duration for a number of Fulbrights and locations, but some, like the one that I was on, are tied to institutions or universities. And so for the university one, they want you to be there around their students. And so I interacted and interfaced with a lot of their graduate students who were in a media aesthetics kind of MA is what they were doing. And then they also had PhDs in kind of media criticism. And so that could have been a 6-month or a year. And I bulked it a year. I also went at a time in my career where I was also putting in my tenure materials at the end of the Fulbright. And so if it looks like an overproduction of work, that's because I was overproducing in order to get a really concrete and polished, finished object out of the Fulbright, which I think the next time I go, I'm not going to have that pressure to do that. And I can maybe even plant the seeds of a project or begin working on a project and not feel that I need to finish it before I'm done and leave.
That's really good to know. That also sounds horrible. Even though I knew that, I forgot till you said it again. So, yeah.
Well, on the other side of it, it is time away from your institution. There's a Atlantic Ocean in my case in between us, and the time difference was pretty bad. And so I really used that time difference to be like, oh no, I can't join that Zoom. That's 7 p.m. for me. And I was also on research leave. So I was able to propose this as a funded research leave because Fulbright, like the Guggenheim, like certain NEA grants, most institutions will recognize those as external fellowships that they they should recognize, I think, as like a research leave. Not every institution, and I was at Indiana University before this, and I think I probably would have had like an extra step to really get them to let me have a full leave. But that was also the nice part about it, is that it was a leave. I was able to just do my research and come up with these kinds of speculative design interventions without, I shouldn't even say distraction, because I love teaching, but teaching wasn't something I had to prioritize. The program wasn't something I had to prioritize, and I could really be in this other world. And that's actually, I think, the best part about the Fulbright, is you enter into another world, another culture, and it's immersive. And the spirit of the Fulbright is about cultural exchange. So you're honest about who you are and where you're coming from, and you want to share that with the people around you, but you're also this like sponge, just like soaking up everything around you.
I have more questions, but I was going to see if Natasha had any luck, or if there were any more from the audience before.
Natasha is still on the move. So,
Oh, okay.
Attendees, please.
Yeah. And
Ask
maybe
the questions.
I had another thing about Fulbright we could just stick in here, which is that for the specialist program, what they do is they don't give you one Fulbright. And I don't know what they do, Sarah, with you, and it would be great to hear. But what they do is they accept you to be on their Fulbright roster. And then so you're on a list for a number of years. I think it's 3 years, in which you can do more than one of these little run-in things. And but you do them
at that institution or at multiple
institutions.
Multiple, okay.
Either you decide to do one and you make a relationship with that institution, or the institution already has something they want you to do.
Got it.
So you can see that, and also you see people who might be willing to work something up with you. So it's a little different from a one-to-one relationship.
That's so good to know, because I did hunt down DePaul has like a Fulbright person here who does the training and helps you write your proposals and your grants. And so a lot of universities have that. He was going to come on, but he couldn't coordinate the time. But in looking him up, I also saw on Fulbright, which maybe you two can talk about, although your paths to get there were different. So I know you can build a relationship with an institution. I strategically want to go to Ireland. I like their program in XYZ, get to know the faculty, work it out. But I've also seen on the Fulbright website, you can see what places are looking for people, right? So you can see like literally, and then that was exciting, because I was like, I want to go here and here, and oh, they have a need for this. So I don't know if you, in both your experiences, have, I don't know, just thoughts for people who are even just like curiously poking around at that right now.
I can hop in and say, I went in really, really blind to this process. One of my colleagues at IU had done a Fulbright postdoc. It was something like the in-between Fulbright, where you're like, it was right after grad school, but it wasn't a Fulbright scholar position. And she had loved it. She went to Spain. And we decided that we would both apply for Fulbright at the same time. And then I ended up leaving the institution to go to Notre Dame. But I went through that exact long list, Heather, that you're describing, where it lists country. You can do by country, or you could do by discipline. You can kind of like filter. And I did by filter, and I did design, I did art. And of those programs, I was like, okay, which one doesn't have a mandatory language requirement? Because some Fulbrights do require you to learn a language and then prove proficiency in that language as part of the application process. And so I kind of went on the easy route to English-speaking countries. I also thought, broadly speaking, Scandinavia and design would already bring something very interesting to my perspective on design. And so you do, as Natalia said, you do kind of like scrap together this, like no one's guiding you. I reached out to the institution, and it's so scrappy. It's so scrappy. I reached out to the director of the program and kind of gave a very quick spiel, maybe like a paragraph or two, about what I was thinking about. And what I didn't realize at the time, but after I went there and then became very good friends with all of these people, is that if it is an institution that is hosting a Fulbright, they're always looking for who is the next person they want to bring in. So while it can be very competitive, there's also an element to like, you're helping them just as much as they're helping you. And so they want to find a person that will be a good fit with, you know, the programming that they have going on, their students' interest, other faculty collaboration. But there's also a sense of like, they want someone who's independent enough to have a research agenda, to not feel, you know, some of the institutions, for example, already have their own faculty and staff and they're managing those folks. You're kind of this like rogue agent visiting person who floats in between things. And they want a sense that you're okay living like that for a little while. And then, you know, when they have something to bring you to, or they want you to meet somebody, or they want you to give a little talk, you're kind of there as this resource of new perspective and artwork, design, thinking that you can add. And so when I was at the University of Bergen, when I got there, they were doing this amazing conference series where they were bringing in people from like Microsoft who were designing the new AI deployment, or, you know, Fluxus artists and designers from like the 80s. And they had a really good visiting artist series that I was able to kind of plug right into. But don't feel bad entering this process kind of winging it and letting your interests guide you. That's a really good, I think, way to enter the process. If my memory serves, you know, you write a long statement about what your project might be. And the best thing about Fulbright is no one checks to make sure that you do what you say you're going to do. It's kind of like the letter of entry, and then nobody's checking. Now, I did it at a particular time where I really wanted particular outcomes, but they don't expect you. They actually do expect that your project's going to change once you get there, because I didn't know anything about Norway, and I was like, I'm probably going to do this maybe. And then when I got there, I was like, oh, right. There's no way I can learn enough Norwegian to actively intervene in some of these archives. So what can I do instead? So you can sort, like I said, filter by topic or interest, design, art, media, criticism, or you could do location-based and try to find ones that don't have a foreign language proficiency test, or find one that you can quickly do a little proficiency, or take a class over the summer, or take a class leading up to the actual Fulbright. Because you find out, I think, in like December, and depending on what you propose, you have a number of months before you end up going. So you can take classes in the language to have the required proficiency as well.
So like you knew you were
That was
going
such a
a year
disaster.
before you went, right?
Sorry, Heather, what'd you say?
Sorry, you knew you were going a year before you went. Is that right? Ish?
Yeah, something like that. Like you
Okay.
you get like the Fulbright Scholar process. You submit everything, I think, in like October. It's like ingrained in my memory from the trauma of waiting. But you like submit in October, and then I think you find out that you're a finalist in November, and that's again, so you can tell your institution like, hey, this might be coming down the pipeline. Can I apply for research leave? And then I think in December you find out if they've chosen you. And it's really, in the process that I went through, it is pretty much based on the institution's need at that point. So there's a committee of Fulbright people that review applications. That's, I think, to get you into the finalist stage, if I'm remembering that correctly. And then the institution that you apply to is really they're the ones that choose. Like, yes, we do want to work with you, and that makes sense because you're going to be living with them for 6 months to a year, and you become their problem at that point.
Right.
But am I understanding correctly, your application is pretty open-ended in terms of what you were going to make? Like, you did not foresee making this large entity when you went there. And you didn't necessarily know about fables there. And I mean, maybe storytelling was a throughput, but so it was dependent on the location and the research available.
Yeah. And you're not going to be able to, you know, when you're proposing things, there are going to be so many holes because you're not on the ground actually in those archives if you're doing archival work, right? Or if your project is based off going to certain monuments or accessing certain kinds of people or working groups or their scholarship, there's always going to be this like gap because you're not there. And so you do your best to kind of say, you know, I want to try to do this. This might be my plan B. And then once you get there, it's figuring it out. And the other thing that's nice about the Fulbright is it's fairly legible around the world. So people, if you say Fulbright, most people know or have heard of it. And so they also get the sense that you're a visitor who's interested in academics. And so they are I found in my experience, people were very generous with stepping in and helping point me in the right direction, knowing that Fulbright kind of can equate to being like, I'm a lost little scholar, help me.
I see a question in the chat, I think for Sarah, but I had a quick one for Natalia. I'm just wondering like what the current state of your students' work is, and was it making an impact? Was it making a difference?
Oh, that worked out really well. To tell you the truth, I had my doubts about being able to teach somebody to write something cogent in a week, you know, or 2 weeks or whatever it was. But as it turned out, that those students have gone on to include that work as short articles in periodicals in Czech Republic. And also Dr. Barcova has given the conclusions we came to at the end of the workshop as a presentation in Stockholm recently. So she's now taking it on the road, this kind of approach to teaching people to write in a particular way. So yeah, it has effect. It had an effect, but I wanted to mention another effect that perhaps was more obvious in the specialist program than in the scholar. And that is that they treat you like you're a diplomat. I mean, you're a representative of the United States in a way that I didn't think until I got off the plane I was going to be treated that way. I just thought I'd be a visiting, you know, old scholar kind of person. But many, you know, you have, it is important to remember that you are, you're representing the country to them, that you really are. And considering the situation in our country, it's a great opportunity to make clear your views about democracy and the treatment of various subgroups and this sort of thing. So you have this kind of blowhorn thing. Now, what do you call that? A bullhorn suddenly that you don't expect to have. I wanted to go back and correct an assumption that I may have said or somebody when Liz said you don't really have to be clear on what you're going to do there. You do have to be clear on it in your application. You say exactly what you're going to do there. I think what Sarah was mentioning is that there is the most brief little letter that you have to write at the end that says, you know, I showed up and I did it, kind of. It is not the kind of grueling experience that you would have through your institution, for instance, if you were trying to do something like get a grant through them. So it is shockingly minor.
Yeah.
At the end of all this to say, yeah, I did it, thank you, bye. I mean, that's really what happens. But the beginning, they put you through your pay system.
I just want to acknowledge two things that you said, Natalia. First of all, I was fascinated by American argumentative and European. I don't know. I just didn't know that. So I'm reflecting on that.
I didn't either.
I don't know. It's interesting, I guess. And then Sarah talking about that, I'm like a recovering rule follower. And I know other fellowships I've done, I'm always like, you know, you're in the process of discovering new things, but I'll be like, do I have to do what I said I was going to do? Because I discovered something better. And my experience with any fellowship, specifically fellowship, is that no, it's okay if it changes. And like you said, it's not like doing some type of grant or something where you have to specifically report. So that's also just really good to know. It feels like it allows a certain kind of intellectual and creative freedom that not everything does. So I was happy to hear that.
How true that is. How true that is, Heather. I really felt supported by the program, and as a matter of fact, I was highly supported by the program, and they pretty much saying, go have fun, go do what you want to do, in a way that my institutions don't do that. Yeah.
I'll also add that one of the nice things about the Fulbright is they have a really good archive of former scholars. And so one of the things that I did do as I was applying is I reached out to former scholars who were either adjacent to what I was doing, but most of them were actually people who were alumni from the exact institution that I had been at. And so I was able to hop on a Zoom call with a couple folks, one of whom's partner actually was currently on the Fulbright that I was going on. Like, she had already gone and her husband was there at that moment. So he left me like a little gift in my office when I got there. But and so you can get a sense of what specifically it's like to be in that location around that group of people, if it's at an institution. Tips and tricks for every country has its own politics, its own culture. For example, Norway is very expensive. Not quite as expensive as some other countries, but it's up there. Like, they just discovered their oil, their hidden oil. And so while it's great, they have a nice social safety net, everything is more expensive. And so tips on like how to get by given the Fulbright stipend, but also there's this increased cost of living that you might not be used to, or things that you absolutely have to try or do. And the city that I was in was small enough that after about a month, I'd walked around it. I felt very much at home, and I was really grateful to the previous Fulbrighters who had pointed me to things so I could acclimate even faster. So that's something that you can do as well, is like, and as I've now since had those Zoom calls with people that are interested in applying to that specific program, right? So we're now like this family that you reach out to, and we want future Fulbrighters to have just as an incredible moment or time as we did. And so, use us as a resource, and definitely reach out to people who have been at the places that you might be interested in going to. And then the final thing that I'll say is it's kind of this amazing old school. I feel like programs like this are rare and they're disappearing, because it really is the spirit of like learning and letting an experience shape who you will become. And it's funded. And so I just think that those kinds of experiences and programs are few and far between, given what is happening right now with defunding certain kinds of institutions. I think that something like this is so special and unique that even if it feels like, oh, I don't know if I want to do it, apply. It will change your life. And I just think it's one of the most unique things you can do.
All right, we have another question. This is from the Q&A, and this is for Sarah. Sarah, I'm working on an MFA in visual communication design with an interest in game studies through application of phenomenology, and I want to pursue a Fulbright. Your work, Otherworldly in particular, runs adjacent to a lot of what I'm interested in. Do you find it difficult to create an agenda for multidisciplinary work like that? And how do you describe your own work and research?
I'm going to answer the first one. First of all, I think you should look at the University of Bergen's Fulbright and reach out to me if that does look like it aligns with what you're interested in, and I can put you in touch with Scott Retberg, who runs the program. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, no, but I'm a fairly neurotically organized person, and so multidisciplinarity doesn't scare me. However, you do need to either have a project manager or have the energy of a product manager in your bones. What I really love about multidisciplinary projects like this is that when I get frustrated with JavaScript, for example, I can put that away and I can move over here to the archive work, right? And so I can kind of flit around and bounce between different problems that I'm trying to solve within a kind of complex program of design, game design, video installation. And you know, I also have people in my life that I go to when I'm really running up against those creative barriers, or I feel completely exhausted by, you know, illustration, for example, or if I really need help with coding. And so I think having a nice kind of bench of people around you, and again, not to like tote the Fulbright, but the Fulbright builds out your bench, right? It builds out your bench internationally. To go to those folks and say like, hey, I'm having some trouble with this. So there was a really rad kind of, it's like a video artist. His name's Yave, who was also a visiting scholar at the University of Bergen while I was there on the Fulbright. And he sat me down and we went through JavaScript, like coding for like a whole afternoon. And it was like I just needed someone to bounce those ideas off of. And thankfully, you know, he spoke English and we were able to just have a nice time over coffee and talk coding. But to answer your question, the first part of your question, no, but I think you have to enter a complex project with a fairly diligent sense of backwards engineering your timeline and knowing that things are not going to go the way that you want them to the first or second time, and just having a kind of aggressively scrappy mentality to your own work. And then how I describe my own research in brief would be, I'm a speculative designer. I engage in a research creative process, and I allow the critical writing that I do and the material exploration to kind of Ouroboros itself in my process. But please reach out to me, and my website, I'll share my website in the chat and you can find out more about me there.
Sorry, I'm muted. Before we think about if people want to let folks into this side, are there any questions among panelists or Natalia, Sarah, for each other, or anything else?
I think I kind of stopped at application of phenomenology. I had to, my brain's like over here.
Yeah.
I actually have a question for the person who said that they were analyzing subjective experiences. I wouldn't mind hearing about that sometime soon. I don't know, Sarah, do you have a question for me? Do I have a question for you?
I mean, I had never heard about the specialist position, and my question for you about that would be, do you get, so people will reach out to you in this like 3-year window of like, hey, can you come do a short thing? Do you have the capability to like put up a flag and be like, I'm available if anybody, oh, that's great.
You can put up exactly, put up a flag, and, or actually, I think what I'm going to do, because it's funny because you can't do 2 back-to-back, you have to wait 2 years. So that means that you're doing it on the edges of your 3-year on the roster thing. So, but I've just now started, because I went last summer. So I've just started thinking, what am I going to try to do, you know, next year, which will be the end of the 2-year blank that I have to do. So what it does is it gives, first, as you said, you know, the wider international bench. I mean, it has made it possible, that Fulbright made it, that little Fulbright made it possible for me to worm my way into a bunch of people that I've been wanting to worm my way into in Finland. So I'm starting to corral something for that. Yeah, so that's exactly the way it works. Yeah.
And you're saying you can't put the flag up that says I'm available until you've already done it once, right?
Right, because why would you do that?
Yeah.
Because you were already doing your one thing, and you do your one thing, and you succeed at it, and you think, I want to do it again, and then you start looking at those. I mean, can't imagine trying to plan 2 out, which you hadn't done the first one.
Yeah, The other question, which I hope this is okay to ask, I'm sure the website clarifies it, but I want it like from the sources. And so I know like research leave sabbatical, applying for all of that, but is your travel housing all covered by Fulbright? And do they give you any money for materials, supplies? Do you ask for that in advance? Did you do a separate grant for that, et cetera?
It's a wonderful
Great
experience.
question.
It's a great question, and I'll go first because mine's shorter, as it was short. They gave me everything. They gave me everything. And they gave me a little extra so that I would do things like take the various deans out to lunch and stuff like that. So it was very comfortable. Yeah, very comfortable. I was very happy. Those were my last happy days, really. Okay, Sarah. What they do?
Yes. So they give you a stipend, and that stipend includes money for residents. They pay for your flights, and I think they also give an additional stipend for traveling around Europe. So they do encourage you to use your Fulbright as a home base and kind of hop around. It's not huge. I can't remember. It might have been like $200 to $400 just for the hopping around. So it's like cover tiny flights here and there. But then you can apply for even more if you're like, I really want to do it. But what I liked is that I was on a fully funded research leave from my institution, and I had the Fulbright stipend. And so I could also sometimes like ask my university. I was like, oh, my own research money could cover some of this. But and the only reason I say that though is because Norway was pretty expensive. So they gave you like a monthly, you would get paid every month. And their people would just directly bill whoever you wanted to, which was great. So I didn't have to actually get a Norwegian bank account, which certain countries are really tough on like getting a bank account. You need like basically a social security number or the equivalent in that country. And so Fulbright, what's nice about the Fulbright is that it has folks who are on staff who will help you with all of that logistics, the finances, and then they can direct bill. Like the place that I was staying, my rent, I just was like, here, Fulbright person, talk to my landlord. And they did that. And the like conversion rates and all of that. And then just, I'm on a similar timeline as Natalia. I'm about a year now out. I was there last year this time. I'm not doing taxes on that income. And I'm really glad that I didn't actually do a bank account. So it's not technically in the like foreign, it's not like foreign income. It's from the US Fulbright. So on the tax side,
Yes.
I'm glad.
That's important, Sarah, because because I am a YNAB nerd, I put away money for taxes, and you do need to because you get taxed on all the money that they pay you. I don't know if you get taxed on what they spent on you, but you get taxed on what they pay you. So just make sure that you remember that.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good to know. Huh, okay.
It is because so it was a little different for me. I could travel for free around the country I was in. But as soon as I left the country, it wasn't free, but they would give you a percentage if you made a good argument. I mean, it's very kind of,
Yeah.
loose.
Very cool.
The travel. Yeah. So, yeah.
And for those who maybe didn't see, I'm trying to moderate the chat at the same time. Natalia has offered, she's on the Fulbright peer review committee, who so has offered her time if folks are interested in some QA around that, and some other information about some other Fulbright folks that she knows. And also looks like in Natalia's situation, she said funds are given for materials, books that are left in the country, housing. In her case, Ecuador is much more expensive to stay for a short period rentals. So it seems, of course, like in all of them, things vary, et cetera, as we know. So just very good to know.
Yeah,
And some conversation about the impacts of the new administration on funding. So I guess that's also interesting.
I wouldn't be surprised if that really became a bone of contention, because the reason they're sending, if you think about the State Department, first of all, the State Department program, the State Department has a very smart reason for doing this, because it is sending people around the world who are making relationships and promoting democracy. If you're not interested in worldwide relationships nor democracy, then this would be a nice budget to try to cut. So I'd say do it now rather than later. Try to do it now rather than later. Yeah.
Boy. Yeah.
Applications due September 15th.
My beloved country, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anyone on the other side? Amy, Bryson, Camilla, you all want to come in and hang out for a couple minutes? Don't be shy. I feel like usually people want to come over. You
Come
have to
on in.
you have to chat, say
We can,
something.
we can
Katie,
give you a background.
I'm like, come on, Katie. Yeah, you don't need a background. Come
Oh,
hang out with
Spencer's in.
Mhm.
Let's move him over.
Spencer. I don't see anybody yet.
There's a hand raised.
Sarah, I would
Raise your
just
hand,
add,
we'll bring
Dan
you
has
over.
to move people over.
what'd you
I
say?
would just add that it is, I
Yeah.
know it sucks because you had to work so hard because you were doing your tenure application as well as your Fulbright, but it is really good that on both sides it forced that work to happen. And yesterday was the first time ever that I've heard of a university or a program who gives faculty that semester off to complete their package, which would be genius. And probably doesn't happen very often, but I do think it's good that you, on both sides, that was a way that you could really make an amazing body of work.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's obviously, it can be such a big time commitment. So thinking strategically about what makes sense in your own career trajectory. But it does, it just like boosts your thinking, it boosts your connections and your networking. I mean, exactly what Natalia was saying, the spirit of the Fulbright is so much about like learning from others, but also sharing our perspective as Americans. And yeah, I even though it was stressful at times, I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, Amy. I'm still trying to get people to come to them into the matrix, as Bryson said.
Oh my
Amy, you can
goodness.
come over. Dan has the power to bring you into the matrix and
Just
hang
raise
out.
your Zoom hand.
I'm always the chair of the social committee, the fun committee. It's not a joke. Sort of a joke.
I was laughing because I assumed it was a joke, but obviously it's not a joke.
No,
No.
Heather is in charge of the social committee.
I have another really basic little tips
Let's
and
hear it.
two things is I may have thought this was a bountiful stipend. It is a bountiful stipend, but I thought it was extra bountiful because Czech Republic is much cheaper to live in than Seattle. So I was constantly shocked by how little everything cost and how beautiful it all was. And so that was probably part of my thing. But if you're in Ecuador, as you say, it might be a different story. Yeah, but the tips and tricks thing I had was that when you apply for this, I don't know what this happened with Sarah. I'm fascinated to know. There is no graphic design area. You know, there's no design area. So I ended up under something like American historical references or something. It had nothing to do with teaching architects to write. So be prepared that, and the country will know what works for them. So they'll say, oh, no, we're putting this under, you know, American, it was like American history or something like
Well,
that. It was
that
strange.
checklist I added in the chat, which it didn't quite paste right, where you can see like the institution, the category, what they're hiring for. So it did look like you had to be like creative about where you might fit. Technology
Yes,
or right.
creative.
Yeah.
And
So
and you have to think, well, who's you know, if you say technology, then you're in with every, you know, tech
Yeah.
bro in America. So, and that's not you really. So
yeah.
you have to excuse me. I have a little thing going on with.
No, being in Seattle by all the glass domes, the
Oh my
Amazon.
goodness.
I know.
Yes. So yeah, just so be aware, like you don't quite fit, and that's okay. You'll
Yeah.
find one. You'll make one. You'll get one.
Yeah, I would emphasize that. Like, don't be discouraged if you aren't seeing something that's exactly perfectly describing who you are. I mean, the longer I am a designer, the more I feel like I'm always describing what design is and to different audiences. And so it's actually kind of, at this point, it's very natural for me to be like, oh, let me tell you about what that is, given this context and like what I think you might know about design. So don't be discouraged. And I loved your use, Natalia, of the word worming. Like, you are just kind of this like worm, kind of just like finding your way in. So really like embrace that. And the other thing that I'll say is, so if you're there for a longer Fulbright and you're kind of, you can use, you know, your location as a home base. I did apply in addition to the Fulbright for like some residencies, just like around Europe. Because once you're in Europe, you're like, oh, okay, it's like a 20-minute plane ride over to this country, or like a 20-minute plane ride over to that country. And so I found this like artist residency in Poland, and I spent like a couple weeks just in Poland, living in Poland. Or you can ping other universities who might have design programs that would normally cost, with a plane ticket, a lot of money to go give a talk at. But if you're like, hey, I'm a Fulbright and I'm here, would you have any interest in hearing what I have to say? And then they're like, oh yeah, well, like we have some time here. And so I did a lot of like visiting talks in France and Sweden, Germany, actually not in Germany, but in Poland even, and then was able to kind of like hop around really easily. And like I said, there is some money that you can apply for through the Fulbright program more broadly to supplement that in addition. Because again, they do want you to basically, like Natalia said, be a diplomat in some sense.
That's true.
Show,
It always feels
show other
weird.
people that Americans aren't crazy loons.
Yeah. I do feel like we have people, I mean, people are open. We have people email us, I'm going to be in Chicago. Would you like me to come to your class? Sometimes we can dig up some money. And I think I always feels weird to reach out and be like, hey, can I come to your class? But I mean, people do it all the time. And I think we all love having visitors. So yeah, just like making what Sarah just said, making yourself do it, worming your way.
And then
Worming your way. It's a great
say
phrase.
you worm your way into KABK, which is one of my favorite institutions, you know, in The Hague. Once you're in there in your little worm suit, you know, they'll remember you, and suddenly they want you to come back, and they have money, so they'll send you back. So it's just really good for your career. Yeah. Katie, hi. I'm just saying hi.
As we
yeah.
And we only have like a minute.
Yeah, we're kind of wrapping this up. Are there any final questions for our panelists, or
Is Jason going to say something? Hi, Jason.
Hi. I
Hello.
was going to say that I was accepted into the Fulbright Specialist Program in December because I did a project. Thank you. Because I did a project with a Fulbright Specialist last year, and the country asked me to come back, which is the country of Lesotho in South Africa. But in my weekly conversations with the U.S. ambassador, unfortunately, right now, all funding's been postponed for Fulbright Specialist indefinitely.
Oh my God.
No, that was going to be my next dream.
I knew it. And also, is it funding for all the Fulbright Specialists or just for South Africa, because they're having a fight?
Yeah,
South Africa.
that I don't
that could
know.
be?
That I don't know. But
Having a big fight with South Africa, so don't just assume. Yeah, I would double check.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
But
right?
my track was being a named specialist for a very specific project. So you know, if it is just South Africa, it means that I have to kind of rethink my strategy because the whole thing was connected to the government of Lesotho.
Did you say, Jason, a specialist came to you and then the specialist invited you? I was trying to understand what you
I had a client who was a specialist who went to Lesotho, and they brought me in as an expert to help them with this project. And the government, as well as the U.S. liaison to Fulbright over there, was just really impressed with the work we did and asked me to come back as a named specialist.
Awesome. Very cool.
And I've been, you know, I've been working my butt off to do it, but it's just been fruitless trying to get anybody to approve anything right now. So
it's a terrible situation. I have a very bad feeling and a terrible situation, but we just have to If it has been
Oh,
canceled,
hi, Anne.
if it
Sorry.
has been canceled, I hope that you will write to your senator and
Yeah.
congressman, like 1,000 times.
Luckily, he
because-
didn't use the word canceled. They used indefinitely postponed.
Postponed. Well, that's they put
That's
everybody on.
optimistic. That's very
Yeah.
optimistic.
They
Okay.
put everybody on leave. It's the same thing.
Time will tell.
Time will tell.
And we'll tell, but don't let that keep you from figuring out everything and getting it all ready to
Yeah.
just blam
Yeah.
in there as we get it.
I just want to say, like, Jess and I have been talking about doing this Fulbright edition for well over a year.
Yeah.
Because I
Been a
think
while.
there's so many of us that are so excited about global travel and engagement, and meeting people abroad. And so we didn't realize you had some different flavors of Fulbrights. I know Natalia had some technical difficulties, but has offered a lot in the chat, and will hopefully present for us in the future so we can hear. And we will hopefully do this again as well, because we had some other names of folks, and we'd really like to hear from people all over the country. And if it turns out that things are frozen, then how we can be continuing to advocate to keep this program alive, like Natalia said, writing to Congress people and things like that. So yeah, I'm just really grateful for your time and happy to hear your experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Heather and I, we aim to do this a couple times a year. Sometimes it's been once, sometimes it's been twice, but we do try to have something in the fall and then another event like this in the spring. And the themes change, as you mentioned. We'll try to keep Fulbright and international research and scholarship alive in our conversations in some way. But we do tend to, if not a different theme, and we just look at work happening that we want to learn more about, and again, like this, great minds coming together.
Yeah, and we
to
love
discuss.
your ideas too. So I think I don't remember if the last one we did mostly state institutions.
It was
we
all
also-
public institutions at
public
three ranks.
institutions, right, in 3 ranks of faculty, so kind of learning from more junior faculty to full professors. We've also had some asks to hear from community colleges and alternative learning institutions like School for Poetic Computation, for example. So we're always rethinking how we sort of approach this, how we talk about scholarship and learning. And so if you have ideas, or people maybe who are off the beaten path, or quieter online, we love to hear from people we don't know about. Please just let us know so we can provide a platform for folks as well. Yeah.
Thank you,
I
everybody.
want to thank you all for I'm getting attacked by the sun here, but
Yeah,
thank
we'll
you.
kind of hang out till folks want to say bye, but we can.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
We
I
can
have
be
to.
informal now.
I appreciate so much you including me, and I hope to hear more of you. To be honest, I've heard of you, but I didn't really know what you were up to. So now I know, and I hope you'll be in your various mailing lists.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Natalia.
And thank you again to our
Thank you.
panelists.
To the panelists.
And
Thank you.
Sarah and Natasha. Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
And